On August 18th, the train station in Moscow also collapsed.
Holy shit, what the fuck?
Look, the railway station is on fire. The tracks have been blown up.
People in Moscow are panicking.
Fuck, what am I supposed to do? There are children lying here.
The railways are burning. A freight train is in flames.
Hundreds of passengers have been evacuated.
Traffic has been stopped. There's a delivery over there.
We're heading out. Moscow residents report. The roof collapsed after a powerful explosion. The tracks are on fire. The station is engulfed in smoke. Look, that's it basically. This is a disaster. This is a total disaster. Trains have stopped all over the country.
This is not just a blow to the capital, it's a blow to Russia's logistics.
The first car.
The trains, how are they going to remove these massive, incredibly heavy, and completely derailed trains from the tracks? There it is, right there. The very thing that caused all this trouble and chaos, damn it.
Airports are in chaos.
Aeroflot is completely paralyzed, their servers are utterly destroyed, and all flights are cancelled.
Meanwhile, Russia is restricting gasoline exports. And this is just the beginning. The economy is going into a tailspin.
The country is burning. Let's discuss all this with the President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, personal enemy of Putin and Kadyrov, Ruslan Kutayev.
Good afternoon, Dasha. Greetings to you.
Ruslan Kamdevich! Railways are under attack. In the Moscow and Rostov regions, drones attacked 5 regions at once. The drone is flying so close.
Mom!
In Salsk, there's a fire at the railway station. A freight train is burning.
Shit, that was a big hit, guys.
The passenger train was urgently evacuated.
We're blowing up trains, stations, and railway junctions.
Look, the railway station is on fire.
Here it is, the Severnaya power station.
We're in.
Aviation is paralyzed. A hacker attack has crashed Aeroflot's IT infrastructure. 7,000 servers have been destroyed and hundreds of flights cancelled.
The FSB is holding a meeting because the losses exceed $50 million.
Passengers in Moscow are trapped. Sheremetyevo, Pulkovo, and Zhukovsky airports are paralyzed. Panic crush. Telegram failure. FSB shuts down communications and the internet in many regions of Russia. We are entering a phase of total pressure on the rails. Railway.
Fuck, motherfucker.
Across the sky.
Across the vast and boundless seas, we journey forth.
Ruslan Kamdevich, what do you say?
Amazing events. It was especially beautiful when the key railway station in Salsk-Rostov region was destroyed. I know these places very well. There's such heavy traffic there. Everything coming from the Urals and Siberia to support the war passes through there. And suddenly they destroy exactly this part of the railway. These are huge disruptions. It's simply an immeasurable loss of support for the war, for various things. We know that certain regions and military units, they don't just refuel in Rostov, for example. They send tankers with fuel from their own regions. And suddenly that fuel is stuck. And now Ukrainian intelligence agencies are actively bombing the railway trains with their advanced drones, and consequently everything is burning there as well, causing significant damage and widespread destruction. An amazing approach. Absolutely the right thing to do. It should have been done a long time ago, but at least it's happening now. So, in other words, the development, the support for the front, all of that is being destroyed. As for Aeroflot, again, that's an amazing job. They destroyed, just in the Aeroflot system's recovery, right in this electronic Aeroflot system, $50 million. And they say this is going to drag on for a very long time. This means disruptions. This means flights being affected. Russia is a huge country. And if Aeroflot stops, if planes stop flying, then a huge part of Russia basically ceases to be connected to the rest of the country. It falls away. And Moscow's sovereignty over that territory also disappears. I'm not even talking about the economic aspect. Politically, this is a tremendous blow. Logistics have been destroyed and are being systematically dismantled. And so this work that's being done regarding airplanes and passengers, yes, passengers are uncomfortable, and that's right. There's nothing to it. You need to remove the criminal government, and then you can go on vacation and, excuse me, relax. And meanwhile, Ukrainians are being killed and Ukrainian cities are being destroyed. No, this is a significant discomfort now, and they should truly experience what the innocent people of Ukraine are enduring every single day. So they are acting correctly, clearly, and consistently, and this can only be welcomed.
Shulkan Kamdevich, but all this is happening against the backdrop of blocked spare parts supplies and the refusal to service airplanes.
We see planes crashing, engines failing, and the FSB is holding meetings with the Minister of Transport, with the ministry, and then later summons Putin for a debrief.
But this is a very serious problem if the FSB is already getting involved.
Of course, it's a very serious problem. Of course, they can't do anything about it. As for engine manufacturing, when the Ukrainian company Motor Sich sided with Ukraine and stopped cooperating with Russia, Russia's aircraft production came to a halt because Ukraine was supplying the engines. They tried to make their own, but it was a complete failure. They simply cannot do anything at all. They are utterly incapable of performing any action. And even for ordinary bearings, specifically those designed for the railway system, there are indeed very highly heat-resistant bearings, robust ones that are specifically engineered to operate effectively under extremely heavy loads and demanding conditions, which were reliably supplied by both Japan and the United States for the critical infrastructure of the railway. It is a known fact that even a major industrial power like China currently does not possess the capability for such high-quality and specialized bearing production, let's say, to the same advanced standard. And so when they stopped being, not to mention the airplanes that are crashing, it's truly a pity for the people who died, but now planes will crash more often because the aircraft are worn out, there are no spare parts, and engines are failing. And as for the extensive railway system, simply the critical lack of essential bearings is currently stopping a truly huge number of various cars, both passenger and freight, from moving efficiently.
Military analysts claim that there would not have been an aviation collapse if Russia had simply closed its airspace because it is waging a full-scale war against Ukraine and its airspace should be closed. It is at war.
But Putin will never do that because for Putin that would be a sign of weakness, and so it is impossible.
Shulkan Kamdevich, I've noticed that many regional governors are saying that the FSB is jamming communications, that Russian security services are jamming communications and the internet, and that Russians need to get used to this, living without telegram, without communication, without the internet.
In essence, the country is turning into a concentration camp.
Without a doubt, they are now seriously discussing and hinting that they will ban WhatsApp as well. They want to completely cut people off from, let's say, alternative sources of information, completely isolate them. They even presented their own Max app. First of all, hardly anyone, or at least very few people, will want to use only this Max app. And secondly, this Max app will be far from functioning the same way as other social networks do. And all of this taken together is bad news for the Kremlin and the FSB because people have started consuming a different kind of informational product. And these are no longer the enthusiastic crowds who applauded and begged for victory to reach Kyiv and Lviv. They have now come face to face in a very real way with the problem that the Russian authorities, and not just Putin, but perhaps above all the FSB, are willing to risk the lives of Russians without batting an eye. And they will continue to do so. On the railways, on airplanes, at train stations, anywhere, at sea and in the air, they will risk the lives of Russia and Russians. But all of this is simply and solely to avoid any potential image losses and to firmly hold on to their entrenched power. That's exactly how they consistently operate. You see, Dasha, they know they've truly lost. And now they just need to bide their time to get into a sort of stream or direction, a track where they could somehow keep their power with some semblance of dignity. Not a complete destruction or discrediting of power, but at least preserving some kind of face for the authorities. That's exactly what they're busy with. They couldn't care less about Russians. They don't care at all about their deaths. We know what's happening at the front.
Shulkan Kamdevich. Trump gave Putin 10 days, and the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, has already officially stated that, most likely, Russia's war against Ukraine will end soon, or at least the acute phase will.
What do you attribute this to?
Do you think that Putin's ultimatum will actually be enforced?
And what consequences will Russia face if it violates it? That is, if 10 days pass and it doesn't cease fire. What is Trump prepared to do? And what consequences will there be for Russia and for Putin personally?
I think the first thing Trump will do, he's already a hostage. He has been excessively clear, precise, and explicit, despite all his talkativeness and the fact that he often backtracks or denies his own words. Now, he himself has become a hostage to all his statements. Even within his own party, they won't understand. In Trump's administration, they won't understand if he acts differently. I can even guess how this will play out. All his threats are these tariffs, or rather the sanctions he talked about. These sanctions, which are presented as some kind of tariffs, he'll increase them, but the trade interaction between Russia and the US is only about 3 billion. Here, the sanctions will be secondary sanctions specifically against China, India, Brazil, and Turkey, who are the buyers of Russian oil and gas. I think these sanctions will actually be imposed. I don't think they will be enforced with the same severity as they were prepared in the United States Congress, at least, despite the fact that Trump is now not just offended by Putin. He's started to actually truly hate him a little bit because all of Donald Trump's expectations were completely rejected and all of his significant initiatives were also dismissed. He simply expected that Putin would meet him halfway. And now he's about to start acting tough, and all his toughness will come down to imposing sanctions. Not brutal sanctions, but tough enough for Russia. The very fact that if these sanctions, as we've been saying, these secondary sanctions against countries that buy oil and gas are imposed, that's already a blow, a very serious blow to Russia's already struggling economy, because there's nowhere else to go from there. We can see what's happening in Russia right now, what's going on in Russia. They're already killing people. Even the Minister of Transport, the former governor of the Kursk region. Just look at what's happening. The Deputy Speaker of the State Duma lashed out at the chairwoman of the Federation Council of the Russian Federation. What's the reason? And the reason is that now Putin is saying, I let you steal as much as you wanted. I corrupted you. Today the country needs money. Come on, share the money. And no one wants to share. After all, this is a sacrificial killing, and with this Minister of Transport, it was a reminder to ministers and governors, if you don't quickly contribute money to support the army, the same thing will happen to you. And that's why, Dasha, the conflict is escalating now. It's already reached the highest level. If there is a conflict at the level of the deputy chairman of the State Duma and the chairman of the Federation Council, one that is brought out and discussed in the investigative committee, this is the peak. This is already a crisis of political power in the Russian Federation.
The death of Ramzan Kadyrov, an emergency meeting in the Kremlin. The FSB is in a panic. For several days now, Ramzan Kadyrov has disappeared from the radar. There isn't a single live video. Only photoshopped pictures remain, taken back in the spring. Everyone's wearing jackets, most likely in March. According to leaks, Kadyrov tried to take his own life in Turkey, attempting to drown himself in Bodrum. In Sevastopol, they're hanging up his portraits as if it's already a farewell. But in Grozny, there's silence. Has Kadyrov died, or are they just hiding him to transfer the power structure? Who is the successor? What is happening inside Chechnya, and why is the FSB assembling emergency teams in the Kremlin under the pretense of regional coordination?
Indeed, there was information coming from Turkey. Naturally, I have my own highly reliable and well-placed sources within Turkey, and I genuinely did learn directly from them that Ramzan Kadyrov, the Chechen leader, indeed flew to the beautiful coastal city of Bodrum, where he was present and enjoying a leisurely vacation there for a period of time. And according to the information I have, while he was swimming, he started feeling unwell, an ambulance was called, he was taken away, and so on. And at this point, any version could be equally plausible. I want to talk about another exclusive piece of information that I received a few days ago. I was visiting a friend of mine, and someone arrived to see him from Grozny or Moscow. I'm not exactly sure which. So as we were talking, well, this person, let's just say a reliable source, he said that indeed Kadyrov is in very serious condition. And the most important, the key thing I heard was this. There have been various theories about his illness. Some say he was poisoned by the FSB, and that despite the intervention of different doctors from Europe and the Middle East, the source of the damage, the effect of this poison or toxic substance, it's simply impossible to stop this. decomposition in his body, and that he is in a serious condition, and from time to time some kind of medical intervention straightens him out so that he can walk. We can see that. I observe very closely myself. His last official appearance was recorded a few days ago when he was in Grozny, meeting people on the streets of Grozny. On the street, I can't quite remember, I think it was Aslanbek Sheripov Street. There he was talking with women. Well, it was clear that the man is ill, he could barely move. And indeed, his illness, his ailment is overcoming him. Once again, I'm not insisting on any particular version. Some say it's the pancreas, others say his kidneys have been replaced. Still others say it's poisoning. Personally, I'm inclined to believe that poisoning is, after all, Moscow's driving force. They get rid of all those they don't like precisely through poisoning. And it's well known to everyone that the FSB and Kadyrov have long been in quite serious opposition to each other. They are doing everything they can to neutralize him. They are doing everything they can to weaken Putin. Because in fact, Kadyrov and his followers are a very significant force in protecting Putin. And all of this together, in principle, may indicate that Kadyrov's health, or lack thereof, is being targeted, and there are active forces here that will do everything possible to neutralize him.
Ramzan Kamitovich, you've just shared some very exclusive information. So we can assume that if the Russian special services eliminated Kadyrov by poisoning him, they are also preparing for the elimination of Putin. In other words, are they, so to speak, weakening the protective ring around the country's top leader?
Absolutely right. First and foremost, this is aimed at weakening Putin. Here, unlike Prigozhin or say others like Kolokoltsev or Bastrikin, who basically switched sides to the FSB, Putin was left with only two forces he relied on, the National Guard under Zolotov and Kadyrov. And it should be made absolutely clear that Putin relied even more on Kadyrov and the Kadyrovites than on Zolotov. And this was precisely the force that needed to be neutralized. And from this perspective, in recent years, the FSB's active behavior was directed toward this goal. We were witnesses to how much material discrediting Kadyrov was released, which later turned out to be fake and did not correspond to reality. Putin barely had time to defend Kadyrov. Then why is that? Because Putin wasn't so much worried about Kadyrov or standing up for him, but rather for himself, because that was his own protection. And that is precisely why I think we can quite reasonably and logically assume here that the formidable force opposing Kadyrov will undoubtedly do absolutely everything within their considerable power to neutralize him completely, to eliminate him entirely, to pursue him relentlessly in any conceivable way. And so, any expectations of a different outcome here are utterly impossible to entertain. Any ending to this story is possible, and it could happen at any time.
Ramzan Kamitovich, does this mean that the FSB has gone against Putin himself? Is that really the case? And what does that mean then?
Many are trying to avoid this, to run away from it. But in fact, this is profoundly true. I am absolutely and completely convinced of this, because Vladimir Putin is now a desperate hostage of the devastating war he himself started in Ukraine. He has entered such a critical phase that now, if he were to try to bring an end to the war, he would have to openly tell the Russian people, his so-called core electorate, those who are suffering from the most severe and extreme form of fascism, Russism, whatever percentage that might be, that he has not successfully achieved his ultimate goal, that he completely missed the mark and failed. In that case, the leader must be replaced with someone else. In this regard, Putin is entangled. He can't do anything, and the FSB is not there. The FSB is not only well represented in Russian power structures, they are the cementing force of all components of Russian authority. Why? Because this personnel policy was carried out exclusively with the approval and recommendation of the Russian FSB when they were together, as they say, on the same team and trusted each other. And now, consider the children of Patrushev, Ivanov, Bortnikov, well, truly anyone you might name, Kemezov, or indeed anyone at all. They are all individuals who have gone through the rigorous training of the FSB school. Their children have grown up. Some of them are already heading ministries or are deputy prime ministers like Patrushev's son, or leading agencies and major corporations, serious corporations at that, financial, gas, oil, and so on. And now it so happens that the future, the prospects of these descendants, these children of FSB generals, are directly tied to Putin's actions. It would be much easier and better for them to hand over Putin, no matter how it's done. They could shoot him, claim that Putin left a note and shot himself, and then pin everything on him. There are 1,000 different scenarios here. And again, we come back to the point that their actions regarding Kadyrov are meant to weaken Putin, to take yet another step closer to him in order to neutralize him, or, if you like, to eliminate him. This is the way the issue is currently being framed in the Russian state.
Ruslan Kamitovich, who could be Ramzan Kadyrov's successor? In that case, his son, who has already been introduced to Putin and who is now officially married.
No, I don't think so. In fact, I'm convinced that even in this situation, when there are active events related to the war in Ukraine happening all over Russia, they can't put that boy in charge. Although there is another option here. The thing is, if the FSB wants to take full control and Chechnya is no longer governed autonomously like under Kadyrov, but instead is run directly by the FSB, then they could, let's say, appoint one of their own FSB people to oversee this boy. And in that case, the situation would develop in a completely different way. Well, I don't think they'll go down that path because the people Kadyrov relies on are already extremely powerful groups, extremely powerful. They've gained a lot of strength. They haven't just gained strength. These are generals, active generals, people with enormous wealth, people who have built extensive connections. And now if the FSB simply tries to get rid of them somehow, it won't be able to control the situation. They will have to be taken into account. At the very least, their interests will have to be respected. It's hard to say right now. I am certainly not saying that someone like Magomed Delimkhanov or Adam Daudov will be appointed to replace Ramzan Kadyrov. That too, I believe, would be a conflict. Why? These are rival factions of equal strength. If one faction is put in charge, say, of governing the Chechen Republic, it will create a conflict with the other two factions which had equal power. And in this situation, it's very difficult to judge right now. And here, this is the only thing. This is important, Dasha, for our viewers to hear. Here, it won't be Putin making the decision. If Putin were the one making the decisions unilaterally, they would have put Kadyrov's uncle, Ramzan Kadyrov, and his uncle Magomed in charge of the Chechen Republic. Why? Because to preserve those resources, huge billion-dollar resources, to maintain and manage them, it has to be someone from the close family. The boy? No, I think he's just too much of a boy. We remember when Ramzan Kadyrov came to power, they changed the Chechen constitution because by age he was younger. I think the requirement was 35, and he was younger than that. They had to change the constitution just for him. Well, excuse me, when someone is 30 and they change the constitution for him, and when a boy is 17, these are completely incomparable things that don't fit even within simple logic, not even within the criminal logic of Russia. And that's why there will be other options here.
Dear audience, please write in the comments what you think might happen after the death of Ramzan Kadyrov. Does this mean that the FSB will go against Putin? Putin's days are numbered? Will there be a military or forceful coup? Who could be put in Putin's place? Who could be put in Kadyrov's place? In the comments, let us know where you're watching from and leave a few words of support for our duo and for Ruslan Kutaev. Ruslan Kamitovich, now the most important question. Could Kadyrov's death create a zone of turbulence in various republics? This is very important. And could it trigger the fragmentation of Russia?
No. Here we need to be clear. Kadyrov and his influence on neighboring republics. Some experts, without any real knowledge, have said some foolish things. No, Kadyrov has never tried to control or influence neighboring regions. Absolutely not. He was satisfied with what he had, first of all. And second, even if the situation changes within the Chechen Republic itself, it won't affect the neighboring regions, but it will impact the Chechen Republic itself, its internal dynamics, and the behavior of its population. Right now, despite all their hatred for Kadyrov, the FSB understands that the protest-minded segment of the Chechen Republic's population is enormous. If they were to try to make any significant moves, any overt military operations or widespread persecutions, for example, then in any conceivable case out of these three distinct groups, if any particular group finds itself unequivocally on the side opposing the FSB, the vast and overwhelming majority of the population residing within the Chechen Republic will undoubtedly support anyone who stands firmly and resolutely against the Russian FSB. And that would create a completely new situation within the Chechen Republic itself. This process in turn will also affect neighboring regions. It's not just about Kadyrov's death or a change of power. No. If there are any significant military actions or unforeseen events that directly threaten these three fundamental pillars that Kadyrov has consistently relied upon for his authority and stability, if this potentially provokes any significant actions within the Chechen Republic itself, particularly among the local population that has so far remained entirely neutral, patiently waiting for the Chechen forces, the Ichkerian forces, to valiantly defend their cherished independence. But if suddenly the FSB starts to act actively there, and some force, be it Delimkanov, Dautov, or someone else, provokes some actions against the FSB, they will be supported. They will receive active support. And then it will become a very serious confrontation, especially given Russia's lack of strength. It will be a serious confrontation.
Ruslan Kamdyevich, we are approaching the most important question. If the FSB and Russian security services are already betting on the fall of the Putin regime, does that mean the FSB has already developed a successor plan? That's the question. And who could be this successor, this new Putin? Because as we understand, in Russia, it is the FSB that installs the president.
I think this is already known, at least within FSB circles. Let's say FSB supporters. Most likely it will be Patrushev's son, who is currently Deputy Prime Minister. He was the Minister of Agriculture, and there was a certain arrangement that Patrushev Sr. would leave his post as Secretary of the Security Council to become an aide, and his son would be promoted and appointed to a higher position. After all, Patrushev and the FSB have placed all their bets precisely on his son in order to retain political power. I don't see any other candidates today who could claim to be successors to political power. It should be said that this power, this single power, despite all its internal competition and conflicts, is the power they have organized. If anyone is to be the successor to this power, it can only be Patrushev's son. Why not someone else? Well, for example, the governor of the Tula region. No, he can't, because that would no longer be Putin's choice. If it were Putin's choice, the situation would be different. But when Putin is neutralized and someone else comes in, it will be a temporary government. I don't think it will be the father. Most likely the bet will be placed on Patrushev's son.
Dear audience, right now, together with Ruslan Kutayev, we are discussing the complete paralysis of the skies, railways, and aviation in Russia, because the attacks will continue and the consequences for Putin and the economy. Please like this video. Write a few kind words in the comments to support Ukraine, the armed forces of Ukraine, and our duo with the President of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus, Ruslan Kutayev. Ruslan Kamdyevich and I meet every week to discuss important and current events. Ruslan Kamdyevich, thank you. And as always, see you next week.
All the best, Dasha, and best wishes to our dear viewers. I support Dasha. I urge you, let's reach 1 million. But when we need to act quickly, dear viewers.